it's a really harrowing and disturbing movie, and I was wondering what attracted you to that topic.
Well, I got the script from Colin Plank, the producer, right after we left Sundance with Off Hours. He'd also worked on that film. And I read it, and I mean, first of all, the fact that it's based on a true story, and that the person who was involved in that story, or whose story it is, was involved in the writing of the script. Like, she worked with Rick Phillips, the screenwriter, to develop the story. That was hugely interesting to me, and looking at the pieces of the story, for me, the number one thing that drew me in was the dynamic between Eden and the main trafficker, Vaughn, and their very complicated relationship that kind of develops over the years.
That's fascinating. I realize we should back up. The subject matter we're talking about is sex trafficking in the good old USA, right? And it's based on a true story. The thing is, it's an interesting and dicey topic, I think, to deal with, because on the one hand, you know, if you're too explicit, you may look like you're being just as exploitive as a sex trafficker, and at the same time, if you pull punches, it may look like you're not doing justice to the horror that is depicted. So, how did you determine tone, and do you think being a woman affected how you might play it differently than a man might?
That tone question was definitely like forefront on all of our minds, and mine the whole time that we were shooting the film. You know, there is that fine line between, you don't want to create something sort of unintentionally tittillating for someone, and then but you also want to be depicting it honestly and not sugarcoating the situation. So it was a fine line, and definitely something that we struggled with. And you know, for example, when Jamie Chung, who plays the lead, is someone who is often depicted as sort of very, you know, sort of sexualized in the media. And so when we were getting her ready to play this role and doing her fittings and finding her costumes, it was actually really difficult to find things that weren't too sexy for her to be wearing in the movie. I worked with Rebecca Luke, who's been a longtime collaborator of mine, costume designer, to find things that were slightly ill-fitting, and just to get it so it's like, you know, we had this whole idea about the fact that there might be just a box of these kind of clothes at this facility, and they might not be fitted to each individual girl, so they might just kind of hang wrong. But you know, that kind of thing is like a choice that we made that I feel like kind of took that sexualized edge off of it, but still kept it like that's probably what they would be wearing. These are the situations they'd be in wearing it, you know. So those, you know, it kind of translated into every department.
I was wondering if you, like a lot of directors do, did you go like over the line just to see how it would play so you could pull back, or were you already sort of conscious of that line before you put anything to film?
I was conscious of it. I mean, I think we were, for the most part, I mean, some of those choices were made in the editing room, but I think for the most part we made those choices before we even started shooting about what we wanted to show. I mean, there's zero nudity in this film, which is completely about, you know, sexually trafficked girls. And so, which that's a big choice to make. And Jamie, you know, that's a conversation I had with Jamie, and she was really on board with that. I mean, it was just something that I felt like it was unnecessary for this story. And in terms of like the sex and the violence, I think what we did to sort of imply what was going on is actually a little bit more graphic in the viewer's mind than what we might have been able to actually achieve on set. So that was a you know, people are sophisticated at this point. They can fill in those blanks. You don't need to show them every detail.
And it doesn't make it any less harrowing, as we say. I mean, it is a heck of a... I've got to tell you that I think that your opening, and I don't mean like the opening 5 minutes, the opening like 10 seconds is so effective. And I just want to sort of describe it. I'm not going to give it too much away, but it's just a black screen, and you hear this kind of thumping. And at first, because it's a local film, and I've seen lots of, you know, kind of relatively crude, you know, if well-intentioned local movies, I didn't know if maybe there was something like the sound was a little off, or they didn't mean it to be. That thumping turns out, then the first time we see light is when the trunk opens up, and you suddenly see what that thumping is. And it's so sly, that opening. I think it's just very effective filmmaking. You do a really nice job with that.
I appreciate that.
I'm wondering also how you talked about setting the right tone. One of the things I read was that your cinematographer, in concert with you, said that he didn't want to have the film give the film a documentary feel. And I'm really curious about this. It's based on a true story. It's about a real serious social, issue. What does that mean to not give it a documentary feel, and what kind of feel did you give it if it's not documentary?
We used a term called battered beautiful realism. That's kind of what we settled on after having conversations about how we wanted to approach it. And
have you trademarked that?
not yet. But yeah, I think that what he means by that is that that we aren't making a documentary, and we were conscious of the fact that it is based on true events, but it's not moment to moment what she went through, and so we wanted to sort of distance ourselves from that a little bit, but also distance the audience from it a little bit to the point where they can actually absorb it. Because I think if you were I wanted to have a level of realism that made it feel like something that was actually happening, but not that level of sort of reality TV style that would make them feel like they were watching it happen. You know what I'm like? It happened in real time.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something we talked about, and it's and we wanted it to sort of have a beauty to it as well, just because we're both aesthetic people and just want a nice looking movie, but also something that feels gritty enough to represent this subject.